Welcome to another episode of Storytelling in the Tropics. My name is Allison Harrison. So this is part two. We're with Folashade. We could not just leave the story right there. We had to come back because there are lots of aspects of her story that we have not heard yet. So welcome back for part two, Folashade.
Thank you.
I
Thank you
feel
for having me back.
I feel like where we left off, we were talking about your elementary years, tertiary level years, church,
Yeah.
and then the big event or events that happened that changed your perception of your church community at the time. And I think where we left off was an email that you had composed
Right.
to the church members.
Okay.
So we can just pick up
We
back
can
from
pick
there.
up from there. So by now, several things had happened that had, above all else, made me start to feel alienated from a space that I didn't just consider church. It wasn't just a Sunday affair. It really was. This is my family. This is where I grew up. This is where I have fun. These are the people I spend most of my time with. So the email wasn't sent until 7 years after after the event in question,
Okay.
and that email took me about a week to write because what I wanted to do was I wanted to share my story. I knew that it was very intentional, the way in which the meeting was held in secret, the way in which we were outrightly asked to keep details of the meeting quiet. And I, at the time, based on even what prompted me to go forward, I didn't understand why we would want to keep something like that hushed. This is an opportunity for people to learn, for people to be accountable, for people who are hurting alone to feel affirmed and know that there is community and they aren't the only one going through that specific thing.
Right.
This is the point of community. So the email took me a week to write because I wanted to make sure I included as many details as possible. I didn't leave any part of the story untold, even the parts that were difficult for me to share, the parts that would expose me then. Um, and so I put it together in a week, and the email pretty much had, how long I've been a member of the church, what brought me into this space, why the church would have meant as much to me as it did. And then I went right into what happened in the meeting, which would have been, the pastor asking me to almost police report style in front of the rapist share what had happened again.
Right.
And so I did that in the email in the very same way I did it in the meeting. And I know that was difficult for me because beyond the putting it on paper, I know that I'm sending this email to almost hundreds of people. So these people will have this thing forever, and it's, the length of time it took was me working through all of those things. I felt like it was extremely important because I knew at that point that at the point at which I wrote the email that I wasn't the only one that was suffering in that way, had suffered in that way. And many of those people, there was no follow-up. They kind of just left.
Right.
And we kind of moved on like nothing happened for the most part. So I sent the email. I sent the email to the church council. I sent it to everyone that was there, to the rapist, to the youth pastor, to the older pastor, to the deacon board. I sent it to everyone whose email address I could get my hands on. And at the time, I mean, this is 7 years subsequent, so most of those relationships weren't active in the way that they would have been while I was a member there. But I was in contact with at least two people who would have been able to, two people who, one, received the email and would have then been able to be a part of executive meetings to tell me what was happening as a result of the email. And it was exactly as I expected. The pastor got very upset. He called the woman with whom I lived, the woman who was taking care of me at the time, to, just everyone was blindsided by an email like that coming in 7 years later. And so his thing was just like, why would you do something like that? And he started calling me vindictive and all sorts of other things that I don't really remember. I don't want to misquote, but the essence of it was he felt like what I was doing was out of spite.
Okay.
And I made sure to be very clear in the email that I'm not looking for an apology. I'm not looking for anyone to reach out to me. As a matter of fact, you can't remove my name from the membership. I feel like I've learned what I needed to learn, but I also feel like this isn't, I'm not going to keep this inside me because something something happened, and I was asked to keep it silent. And the point in my healing that I've arrived at is one where I know that that isn't healthy
Right.
for me. And what the kind of love that exists, whether or not it's tied to Christianity, it obligates me to share my story because really and truly, your story isn't just for you. You know, your story is also unfolding for others to witness and grow and learn and change. And when you prevent that from happening, you know, you obstruct the natural flow of things. And so I was very clear about that in the email, but of course, members of the Deacon Board were reaching out to me. People wanted to talk, and a lot of it was irritating because it felt insincere. It kind of felt like, wow, this doesn't look good. When did this happen? Only they all knew when it happened because it was something that was discussed openly in the spaces that it would have been discussed in. So there were a few people that reached out and said that, you know, they had experiences like that too, and they're grateful to see that I'm okay, and they're just a lot of people who were remorseful and apologetic. But those were many of those people were the auntie maternal figures,
Right.
you know, and not necessarily people who would have directly been a part of wanting to silence me and erase my story.
Right. Right.
So I sent that email, and there was a lot of talk for a while, and you know, people reached out to me for a long while, even years after. People made an effort to talk to me if they saw me on the road, but I was able to move on beyond that point, and I was sharing with you last time we spoke that, you know, it wasn't until that point that I was able to share any of this story at all without being at the top of my voice because of
Is it anger?
it was so many things. It was anger, it was betrayal, it was shock, pain, all of those things. It was a lot, and I didn't get an opportunity to move those things around because of how much I was keeping that story to myself.
Right.
And it went the way I expected. And you know, years after, I think, you know, there was an associate pastor that made a lot of effort to reach out and try and have conversation. But the point of it was, you know, because I could even sense there were people who I could sense felt slighted almost that I had asked for email addresses without telling them that this was what I meant to do. There were people who I briefed about what I was going to be doing, and they were kind of like, oh, you know, you sure you don't, you want to be careful about what you say. You know, there are a lot of people who are very hesitant about me sharing as openly in that way, and I didn't even come close to telling them exactly what I was planning to do. But it was a powerful turning point for me. I found I was able to, for the first time, share the story without being caught by the pain of it. And I'll always remember it, but not in the way that I was experiencing it before I had shared my story. And so that, you know, that brought me to all the mental health challenges that I would have been navigating with little to no help. And now I am without a community. And because of all the experiences I would have had leading up to that time, the experiences, you know, in these deliverance sessions with people laying their hands on me and so on, and they're not just laying their hands on you; they're telling you things. They're saying things like, "This parent is working witchcraft on you. This one put graveyard dirt in your milk when you were a child." They're telling you some out of pocket things, and then there's no follow up afterward. There's no explanation. You are just to go now. Hearing, for example, that you have thousands of demons attached to, you know, your brain stem.
Wow.
Point being, all of these questions had been raised, and the help that I was trying to get from church, not only was I not getting it, I was being outrightly rejected And even though I actively left, what choice did I have? Because the people who were supposed to be supporting me were also supporting the rapist. And while I understand that this is someone who needs to heal and to rehabilitate and to figure out what's going on with them and needs support, it was kind of like they were supporting me out of pity. Like they didn't, because like I had said to you before, this is somebody who everybody in the church loved. Um, and so leaving the church left me with all of these things,
Right.
and not much help. And it wasn't for lack of trying. I remember paying a large sum of money to have a psych evaluation done. And I did maybe like one intake session. So I had a conversation for an hour with the psychiatrist, and then the evaluation was administered by an assistant, someone who was in training, someone who was fumbling over the different tools. And when I read the report, many of the things that were actual experiences were being reported as alleged. And so I said, I'm not going to get any help here.
So what happened after that? What was your process of healing then, your healing journey?
My healing journey became, God, you're going to have to show it to me now because I have tried everything. Um, you had asked about the jewelry
Yeah.
that I make in the first part of this interview, and that was, so what I started doing was just extensive research. How do you heal? How do you get rid of demons? Because at this point, I am not sure if
What was
some of what
true?
they're saying is
Right, it's true.
factual, because what started to happen as well was that even outside of the context of being in a church setting, having people lay hands on me, I was having these experiences alone now. And so I'm just like, something is wrong. Um, and I would attempt to get professional help, like I told you, and it would either be a dead end, or the person would stop me in the middle of talking and say something like, "This is beyond my level of expertise. Let me refer you to someone else."
Wow.
And I've had so many professionals, not just medical professionals, holistic professionals as well, stop me in the middle of my explaining what my issue is to say, no, we can't, this is too much, we can't handle this, but let me give you a number, and you call somebody else. And I feel like I was in that loop for at least 3-4 years. When I decided to end the search for answers outside of myself, just the search for something that wasn't me, was when that chain of referrals led me to someone who I didn't even call them. I don't know how he got my number. By this time I'm partially Reiki certified now, but that was the first time I had done Reiki.
Reiki. What is Reiki?
Reiki is a form of energetic healing. It's energy work. Sometimes there are light touches involved, but the essence of it is using intention and energy. You are correcting energetic damage that you are holding in your body,
Right.
um, and assisting with any of the processes
Yeah, so you
associated
were
with that.
certified at this time.
No, at this point, I had found someone who did it and opted to have it done. And during that time, one of the things he said was that you would benefit from connecting with a healer who is aligned with your African ancestry. And so I started to get excited again and went on an even deeper search, even further down the rabbit hole. But it was yielding the same results. People were in the middle of my sharing what my issue is. They were stopping me and saying, "Sweetie, this is too much. This is a big bag. We can't handle it." And so that loop, I feel like I was in it for about anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Just searching, doing research on my own, but searching for answers outside of me, searching for people who could help me with what I felt was something happening to me entirely from the outside, or and that cycle ended when, as I said, I got a phone call from someone who I didn't give my number to. And at the time, I was still teaching. I had a grade 1 class. And I remember when my phone rang and I answered it, the voice I heard on the end of the line made me move from where I was among the kids and lock myself in a classroom. I don't know who is on the phone with me. To this day, I don't know how he got my number. But he begins to tell me what he's capable of and all the schools of wizardry and so on and warlockery that he's studied at. I might be misquoting now, but the essence of it is a whole heap of magic something and or how ordained in Poco he is, and just alluding to the fact that he is in fact a very powerful Obeah man. And he said whatever my issues are, and I started talking for a little and I stopped, and he said it doesn't even matter. Your issue is ancestral. Just bring $500,000 where I will purchase for you the unblemished goat, and I will slaughter it over your head and sprinkle you with the... And I stood there and listened to what he was saying. I said, all right, so are we going to... At this point, I don't know what do you say?
Did you believe?
I'm about to teach social studies, and if I believed...
Did you believe? Yes.
Absolutely. Even the sound of his voice, not knowing who he was, it made me move from the presence of the children I was around. And I said, just trying to grapple with, should I even listen to this person any further? I said, okay, well, are we going to do a ceremony for the goat? Are we going to pray?
So did this happen? It happened?
The goat? No, it didn't happen.
No, just check it.
It didn't happen.
I mean,
that
would be a different vibe to the story altogether.
I don't think we would be here like this, honestly.
Why not?
Just based on what he was describing to me, when you interfere, when you dabble in that kind of magic, there is sacrifice involved all the time.
Yeah, you get something and it takes something too.
Absolutely, and if one transaction is $500,000, first of all, how are people finding the money? And he in an attempt to convince me, he shared some of the work that he's done with other clients. He's told me about like gunmen that have come to him like covered in blood, and him do him thing and chop up.
So he never introduced himself to you. He never. You don't know who it is.
At the end of the conversation, he told me his name. At the end.
Okay.
And still didn't tell me how he got my number. But when I asked him about the goat and if there's going to be a ceremony, Thanksgiving for the goat, he said, don't worry about the friggin' goat. Just bring him money and we will solve your problems.
I'm just saying I could be wrong, but $500,000 is a lot of goat. I could be wrong.
No, what he's saying.
I mean, I know the process is what you are paying for.
Absolutely.
And the results is what you're paying for.
And so if one transaction is $500,000, and one of the things he shared was that because of some of the work that he chooses to do, his life is impacted greatly. Like he once experienced like 6 months of just not having any money at all. And if Obeah men, if that industry is, and I'm calling it industry because it's become a thing. If it's
become, or has it always been a thing?
It's always been a thing, but the way it's appearing in the public now, how common it is on the lips of everyone. There was a time when people were doing this kind of thing in secret. Then.
With the whole gartering thing. I mean, that people are singing about that.
Absolutely.
More. I'm not saying they never did, but they're singing about it now.
People are just way more open now.
Yeah.
And he said, he experienced just 6 months of nothing. And if one transaction is $500,000, you had to have done something to have no money for that time. And he said he ended up having to make a sacrifice for himself. I mean, I'm getting into his story, but long and short of it is, my search for answers outside of myself led me to this person I don't know, this person who could inflict harm if he wanted to. Because even after I told him, okay, I'll think about it, just some answer to get him off the phone because I have to go now. He's like, I can send you samples of my work. I told him no. He sent them anyway.
Sorry, when you say samples of your work, in my field,
right?
When someone asks for a sample of your work, you're sent like a link, some sort of soft copy, resume, cover letter thing.
Nothing about what he sent me was soft.
I'm just saying, what does
what is
the resume
of a man's work?
The sample of a wow, yeah. What does a Obeah man's sample look like?
Photos and videos of up close photos and videos of ritual spreads of the ritual in place. And so he sent me a video of a set table, human skulls, stalks of ganja, candles covered in a yellow cloth, things that look like offerings, but a set table for something. He sent me another video with a gentleman kneeling down and a pig being slaughtered over his head and being drenched in the blood that was draining from the pig's neck. And just some up close photos of things like that.
Right.
So it was at that point that I said, you know what, though? I have to do something else because clearly asking for help is not working. And that's not to say that we ought not to ask for help. But I think the way I was asking for it was wrong. I was asking for it from a place of there is no help for me if I don't get someone to help me. And that notion is incorrect. And I think I met, I'm very grateful for everything I've ever experienced because of the place that it's brought me to. And I think I met all the roadblocks that I did because I needed to get to a place of understanding for myself that the answers that I'm seeking, I have them. I just need to learn how to listen and respond appropriately. So I'm out of church now, and I've been running in circles trying to find help. It hasn't worked. And this is when I start doing a lot of research into holistic healing, into just healing on a whole. I started spending way more time outside. I started practicing yoga on my own. I started doing breath work on my own. Anything that I found that I resonated with, that I felt would help me to move some of the energy around, I did it. By profession, I'm a teacher, and I even when I was living in Mexico for a little while, that's what I was doing. But what shadow work is something that I found has always come to me naturally. It's the thing that helped me to survive. I may not have been using it effectively, but it was something that I now understand came to me naturally, and something that has helped me to navigate all of the things that I've shared with you and navigate them in such a way that I'm now able to I've been able to not only transmute those things, but for my entire life experience to not just become a story that continues in a positive way, but it's now a practice. It's now something that I offer as a service to help people in a similar way. So I've started a yoga practice. This is how the jewelry comes in, because I get into crystals as well. I start making jewelry for myself, for my friends, and people like them so much that they were just like, you really ought to sell these, and that really was where that came from.
So the jewelry you have on now, any of them yours?
Yes, I made these two.
Okay.
And that was a healing experience in and of itself. Like I said, I spent a lot of time outside, and very intentionally. I spent a lot of time listening to the words of people who the stories of people who went through a lot and healed, the stories of people who went through a lot and healed and were able to use that to help other people. I listened to what they did. I watched what they did. I listened to the things they didn't say. And all of those things helped me to shift an immense amount of suffering into acceptance, into understanding, into love. And it also brought clarity around what was really happening in those deliverance sessions. It became clear to me that I wasn't possessed at all. And a lot of people are being misdiagnosed as possessed. And I'm not saying that people can't be possessed, or that it's not happening, or that it's never caught in that setting. But very often people are being treated as though they're possessed when they're not, and it causes extensive damage, especially because more times than not they're not able to provide a follow-up. They're not able to say to this person, oh, you don't have demons anymore. You literally leave that setting feeling like they're coming at you from your clothes, from the things you watch, from your food. You become you're not able to function.
Right.
And that kind of experience is also extremely isolating, because who do you talk to about that? who do you share that with? And even worse, at the time when I was experiencing it extensively, I was a teacher. I was teaching small children, and so I was terrified of possibly exposing them to harm, when really I was just hurt, and the hurt was being compounded. Um, so it was during the pandemic that I offered my first shadow work session.
What is
Um,
shadow work?
Shadow work. I always have a hard time saying his name. Carl Jung.
Carl Jung.
Yeah. Um, he speaks about the different aspects of the self, and the shadow is among them. The shadow just being all the parts of you that exist that you're not expressing, anything that you're suppressing. And so I know the name shadow generally carries a negative connotation, but it literally means things that aren't being actively seen or expressed. And so things that exist in your shadow can be good as well. For example, you can naturally be a people person, but because someone caused you to feel shame for that, it's a part of yourself that you suppress. And so because it's there, it's a part of you that needs to exist, because all your parts are there for a reason.
Right.
The issue is that the shadow is now running the operation, because anything that you are resisting is
Will persist.
not only persist, will dominate, because these things are generally things that either need to be expressed or released, and they are on their own, they're working to get out of you. And in the time that they will develop an intelligence of their own, people will and can manifest like they're possessed. In a lot of the spaces that I entered, I was also convinced that I was possessed, because of some of the ways that I was behaving, some of the things that I was saying, that in different periods of time I didn't even understand. But energy, once it's created, isn't destroyed. It has to be fully expressed. It's like, if you watch a child who is allowed to tantrum out to the end, you will see that that child is generally able to hug and kiss their parents, even the person who upset them in the first place, because they got to fully express that
Release it.
thing. When we cut that expression off, for whatever reason, it stays there until it is expressed, and it not only stays there, a part of us is trapped there. So if you've ever met anyone who has like Alzheimer's or dementia, something that is debilitating and that like takes away your memory, you will, and it's someone that you know personally, you'll realize that everything that they're saying, in a context, it makes sense. But on this present timeline, it doesn't, because they may be talking about a thing that happened 5 years ago, that happened 20 years ago. It's because pain from that thing is still there, and most likely didn't get expressed, and that's why it's coming out in that violent sort of a way.
Right.
And so, I remember in one particular instance, when I was out of the church context, I was having a conversation with a pastor on the phone, and he said something, and I just started responding by screaming, and that's generally the cue to speak in tongues and pray more. But what had really happened is that I had spent years having the parts of me that were in pain being provoked, being told that the blood of
Poked
Jesus
and
is
prodded.
against you, being told you have to leave. There were people who told me that my name is a curse, and just being related to my dad in the way that I am is, just condemned. It was terrible. So we spoke about the three aspects of self. We spoke about what the shadow is, and that it isn't necessarily bad, because pain from trauma is stored there as well. Essentially, it's anything that wasn't allowed to be fully expressed. If it is that you're a people person, that is something that you need to express. It's a part of who you are. It's almost like removing the gas tank from the car and expecting it to work. Every single part of the vehicle has a function, regardless of its size. Um, and so the shadow work is then, in a gentle, compassionate way, confronting what exists in that space and giving it room to either exist or leave. And so the sessions are just like this. It's a conversation. There are some questions that you have to answer before we get into the space. To one, ensure that you're aware of what you're getting into. Understand that you're going to have to talk about the painful things. There are parts of your past that you have to talk about, your relationship to your family, the things that happened in your childhood. And there's some little questions I ask as well, kind of just to assess what was happening with you. But the essence of it is getting to the root of where the pain started, because if the pain wasn't allowed to express itself, it continued to grow with you, and it showed up. It continues to show up in your waking life. It continues to almost run your waking life, because once you're triggered, what happens is you're traveling back to the time when the thing actually happened to you. What is happening at present is something is reminding you of it. But the thing is most likely not happening again. You're being reminded. You're being brought back to that place because it needs love and healing. And so as I was learning these things, I was able to confront myself and to confront the things that made me suicidal, the things that made me depressed, just all the things that were caused from harshness where there should have been love. Harshness that is also learned, because you learn to abuse yourself in the same ways that you would have been abused. You learn to withhold love from yourself in the same ways love was withheld from you. It becomes the way you express yourself until you become conscious of it and affect change. And so the essence of what I'm offering you is not, I'm not doing it for you, not at all. If you come into contact with me, it means you're ready to do this work on your own. I'm just guiding you through it and creating spaces of awareness where they may not have been. And in so doing, even after you leave the call with me, it's like once you see a thing, you can't unsee it. And so you'll always have access to that part of yourself. You'll always know what it sounds like when that part of yourself is asking for attention, and you'll be able to, in time, because naturally it was a lifetime of things that got you to a particular point of pain or depression and so on in your life. And so it's a process of working through it, but you are able to find those things inside yourself and attract the things and the people that you need to facilitate your healing.
Okay.
And your
Okay.
return to self. Yeah.
Okay. How were you introduced to it? I know you were going through your research into how you heal yourself. So you just came upon it one time and was like, oh, maybe this is what I need to be doing.
No, like I said, when I got into it officially, I realized that this was something I was always very good at doing, and I became naturally good at sitting with myself, because a lot of my childhood trauma forced me to do that. But in my research, I had also started following people on the internet that were talking about things that seemed healing. And I found someone at the time who was doing eye readings. And by that, what I mean is you would send her a current photograph of your eyes, and she would, from that, be able to look into your soul, essentially. And she's sharing things with you that she's led to share, something she may be exposed to and told they can't know that yet, but it's a reading of sorts, and it's something that is helping you get closer to the things that are affecting you. And I found this person on the internet when she had just started, and so she was giving them out for free. She was like, first 10 people, I'll do it. And so I was like, I'm looking for something, so sure. And what she said brought me back to a very dark time. It brought me back to when I was in the back of church halls for hours, and some of the things that they would say in those spaces. She said something about um, being connected to someone who is being afflicted by sex demons. It was very intense and spiritual, and the nature of it was kind of, you need to get away from whatever it is that you're doing now, which made me increasingly paranoid about a number of things in my life that were happening that I knew I shouldn't have been allowing to continue in the way that they were.
Right.
And as her work evolved, I continued to follow her and learn with her, learn through her. We actually became very close. And in, she would do things like that with me. She would share her ideas with me, and I would kind of just sit and listen and talk. But I would, especially when she was more stressed than other times, I was able to ask the right questions, and those questions were what prompted her to ask herself some questions that got her out of the place that she was in and into a place of discovery about herself and moving on. And it was in that space that I discovered what shadow work is, and that it's actually called a thing. Because I found that, even growing up, like when I was in high school, I had friends that were members of staff who were that age. The aunties who I was close to in church, we spoke like friends, and it was something that was healing for me and healing for them. Like that was always the nature of my interaction with people, very intense, and coming away from it with something meaningful. And so in that space with someone who was already into um, psycho spiritual work and into unorthodox and someone who unorthodox spirituality and religion and the occult and just anything outside of Christianity. As I watched her work evolve, I was able to learn the names of different things that I had been experiencing all along. And she made the suggestion that we work together and that she would, offer a consultation and I would, do the session. And so it started out as you do a consultation with her, and then you do a session with me for about an hour, half an hour. But then I found that the sessions were going 3 hours, 4 hours. And so I was like, that's not enough time. But what I did find was just because of, I would go wherever the conversation led and close at a very organic point, and I found that everything that needed to be covered was covered. And, people were generally very moved in this space. And over time, the way the session was structured is directly related to my own process of healing and things that I know would have a particular effect in a period of time like 2 hours. And so and I structure it that way because my specific need was I have a lot of problems. I know exactly what they are. I need some help to solve them now. And what I was being met with was a lot of conversation, professionals kind of talking to me like they're getting to know me. And we're having a jolly time. I'm paying you. This is the fifth session. And you're still handing me papers talking about circle how you feel today. That's, for me, I wasn't unclear. I needed something that was going to move now. And so one session with me is really all you need. You can have more. I have worked with clients twice, 3 times. There's someone I'm going to work with even more consistently now, and so it varies from person to person. But the object is to enable people to assist themselves, to help people realize that you have the power to not only become fully aware of what is happening to you, but to change the story altogether, because I feel like we exist as the collection of stories that we continue to tell ourselves. And if we have an opportunity to meet ourselves in a different way, to understand why we come off as manipulative, for example, and offer ourselves the compassion that was denied to us in that moment, we're able to exist the way we were meant to. And create space for the parts of us that didn't get to mourn, that didn't get to heal, to release what has been there and for us to move on in a healthy way.
How did you transition to Jamaica? Like, how is the Jamaican market for that type of work?
I know for sure no one else here is doing it. At least I haven't seen them, and I've looked. I don't think I've ever stopped doing research. But I was sharing how I got into it in the first place. Eventually, I started working on my own, and at the time, I think when I just started doing it, in my mind, I was going to move back to Mexico because I was living there for like a little bit over a year, like prior to the pandemic. And so I still had dreams of just going back there immediately. But the longer I was forced to stay here, while I was waiting on being able to fly again, the longer I was forced to stay here, was the more I saw that I needed to be here.
Right.
And that there was something that was going to take place in my life that I needed to be at home for. And when it happened, I realized that this is an opportunity to create a space that didn't exist before. And if the more spaces that are there to actually facilitate healing, the better. Because there are a lot of people who are suffering in silence. A lot of people who don't even know that they're suffering because they've gotten so accustomed to it. And so when I realized that I would have been in Jamaica long term, I started thinking of, I mean, right now I'm still thinking of ways to get it into the market, so to speak. But I think at the moment, it's reaching the people that need it.
Okay.
And the people people are finding me, and I'm able to help people. I've had in-person sessions here since I've been back. It's mostly on Zoom, but I've been able to connect with people here since, and so I've recently become very passionate about creating this space in Jamaica, creating a space of awareness for people to know that this exists, that there's a way that they can become empowered to help themselves, and that's not to say that therapy isn't helpful, because it depends. It varies from person to person, and you may need the kind of support that therapist provides, the kind of support that therapy provides as you are working through some of the things that you uncover when you're working with yourself. But just creating a space that exists where people are able to get in touch with themselves without external assistance.
Right.
You
You
be
heal
able.
yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So how does one find you on the socials or anywhere else?
Yes. Okay. So right now I'm operating largely from Instagram. My email address is available. And on Instagram it's Folashade at Folashade underscore. So it's FOLASADE underscore. Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
And there you'll find the services that I offer. I mean, I have about 5 or so specific services, but I really am able to work with anyone who is in need of that kind of help through what they're navigating. People who have been affected by the kind of religious trauma I spoke about today, definitely have space to help people like that. I really can help anyone. You just need to be open to it. You need to be willing to actually see yourself and act accordingly.
Right.
And once you find me on Instagram, my email address is available. Send me a DM, send me an email. Consultations are free. We can start a conversation and work something out from there.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, another very interesting episode of Storytelling in the Tropics. Folashade, thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
This was fun. Yeah.
It was a vibe. It was a vibe.
Yeah.
Well, this has been another episode of Storytelling in the Tropics. My name is Allison Harrison, my guest for the last 2 episodes. Folashade. Shadow work. Religious trauma.
Yeah.
These are important things that everyone needs to face and address, at some point in life.
Yeah.
So, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you too.
Peace, blessings, and unity all the time.
Yeah,
Until next time, bless up.
Up.